So welcome to this webinar, How to Master Remote Interviews. Oh, okay, thanks. Did everyone hear that? I'm the moderator today, so I'll keep things moving along for the next sort of 35 to 40 minutes. And hopefully by the end of this session, you're going to have a really good understanding of what remote interviews are, the do's and don'ts, and the types of technology out there that you can use for your large recruitment campaigns. Before I go through the agenda, let's do quick introductions. I'll start with myself. My name's Lucy Bennell. I've got 30 years experience in recruitment. I have been a strategic advisor with VireUp for the last 18 months. I've trained people, both clients and candidates, on how to do interviews and how to establish interviews. And yes, now I work with VireUp as a strategic advisor. Efe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you very much, Lucy. Hi, everyone. This is Efe Pazarceviren. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of VireUp. I have 15 plus years experience in corporate life. I worked for Ford Motor Company, KPMG, GlaxoSmithKline, and did my MBA at Harvard Business School. Now I'm leading VireUp together with Arda, who is my co-founder. Arda, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. I'm Arda Celebi. I am the co-founder and the CTO of VireUp. I have also 20 years of experience in natural language processing, and I got my master's and Ph.D. degree from Boğaziçi University in Turkey. And I'm leading the technology side of the VireUp right now. Thank you.
Excellent. So let's just go through what we're going to cover off today in this session, the agenda. So we'll start really quickly by talking about what remote interviews are, different types and the pros and cons of each. And then most importantly, we'll start looking at the sort of automation that is used to evaluate the results of remote interviews. This is really important from both a candidate and a client point of view to understand what types of technology is being used to evaluate the results. Then we'll go on to talk about how to set up an interview in order to get the best results, which is critical. What, you know, rubbish in, rubbish out, as they say in any type of technology. And then we'll look at the candidate experience, how to make sure that the candidates are really flourishing. And then finally, we'll be looking at how the technology can be used to evaluate the results of remote interviews. And then lastly, we'll just go across any questions you've got or any additional points to consider that have come up through the process, through the agenda. So let's get started. What are remote interviews? I mean, a remote interview is obviously any type of interview where you're not a human being and sitting in front of a human being in a room. So actually a phone interview, a phone screen could be a remote interview, or a Zoom interview could be a remote interview. But for the purposes of what we're talking about, it's about when a candidate records answers to questions, usually through a video format, and then the results are looked at remotely. Now, there's two different types of these remote interviews. You've got the sort of live video interviews. So candidates will record their answers, and then an HR manager or a line manager will review the responses. And the pros for this is that candidates can record their interviews at any time. So it helps with scheduling. But what you do end up with is line managers having to review hours and hours and hours of interview answers. And then you've got remote interviews where there is some kind of technology used to evaluate and automate the evaluation of the interview answers. And let's face it, technology is being used to speed up recruitment processes, to make them more standardized, and to eliminate bias, hopefully. So the automation that's used in remote interviews is really critical. So let's look at the automation. And again, as I said before, this is really important for both the clients and the candidates to understand what automation is out there and how it can be used to evaluate these interviews. Maybe Arda, seeing as you're the technical genius, you can talk through the different types of technology that is used to evaluate remote interviews to speed up the process, standardize the results.
So, for example, in case of online interviews, since, for example, doing on Zoom, you will not be able to use technology. You just have to sit there and listen to the candidate and ask questions. But when we record the video, we have a chance to use technology on it and extract some information and have hopefully we can score the candidate in a standardized way and get some results. So in this case, for example, keyword search it can be used. For example, audio of the candidate can be transcribed and look for specific keywords in his transcript. But this is a very limited approach you may expect. But for example, there are other kinds of technologies like sentiment analysis. For example, you can check whether a candidate used positive words or negative words during the interview, so that, for example, you can maybe that might help, for example, in some respect. And also, for example, you can do voice recognition and can understand whether a candidate is anxious about something or hesitant about something, just like what I'm talking right now.
But that's really interesting, Arda, because if clients are using voice recognition, and the example you used there was that anxiety or hesitation, it's like most candidates are going to be anxious doing an interview. And so you're in danger of like scoring someone down just for being a human being. And you might miss the fact that they're giving evidence that shows that they're the best candidate for the job. So, I mean, there's a flaw in that. And that's similar to talk about facial recognition technology that's used. You know.
Yes, facial recognition is also similar to audio recognition, but it may also create a lot of biases in terms of the color of the skin or different kind of involuntary movements on the face, for example, or the background, simply just the background.
Yes, I saw an article that was written where using facial recognition technology, people that had bookcases in their background were more likely to get a high score.
Yeah, or glasses.
Yes. And the thing about, which is really serious as far as I'm concerned, in terms of automated interviews, is that this facial recognition technology was developed for law enforcement and shouldn't be used in interviews. And it's proven time and time again, this technology has issues reading darker skins. So it's got an inherent racial bias in it.
Unfortunately.
So I would advise everyone to steer clear of any type of facial recognition technology. So what about other types of technology out there? You know, what does VireUp use, for example?
Yeah, most recently, or over the last 10 years or so, natural language processing has evolved dramatically. We can understand the meaning of words in the sentences, and we can understand the sentence actually, and try to match those sentences with the criteria of the recruiter, so that we can easily recognize what type of things that recruiter looks for in the sentences, and we can score the applicants better.
Absolutely. And so this is about the concept. So it's not like keywords.
No.
So if you were looking for a candidate that's like very driven to deliver results, they haven't got to say, I deliver results. If they say, I hit goals, I'm focused on achieving things, they would also get a point.
Yeah, there are hundreds of ways saying the same thing, actually.
Okay, okay. Excellent. So I think we can all agree that there's upsides and downsides to different technologies. Keyword search, as far as I'm concerned, is very sort of automation 101. I'm very nervous about the use of video, facial recognition or voice recognition, because I think it drives bias. I think someone just commented on a program that they saw about the use of facial recognition technology as well. And, you know, really the new AI tool that's going to enable clients to be able to manage a large number of interviews in a standardized and efficient way is going to be like the natural language processing.
I think when it comes to selecting the right tools for the job, many providers and even their customers realize these technologies, these opportunities, these new tools, and they start to think along the lines of, okay, what can I do with this technology? Instead, the thinking should start with the solution, with the need, and work backwards to create a custom designated technology for the purpose. So I think exactly as you said, with this law enforcement origin of the facial recognition, voice recognition technologies, etc., I think they are not for these purposes. They might have merit in some other settings, but not necessarily. Just the fact that we can apply them here doesn't mean they are the right solutions.
Yeah, you create a tool for interviewing candidates, not moving a tool from trying to find criminals and use it for interviewing candidates. Yes, I'm interested to know that documentary that you watched, Tiffany. I watched another one called Computer Says No. Sorry, Tiffany commented. And that looked into this bias with facial recognition. So moving on, okay, we've chosen our technology. Then we need to actually set up the interview with the questions to get the best results. And so, you know, if we imagine that we are a blue chip company, we're recruiting for high potential talent globally, we're going to have 1,000 applications. We need to set up an interview that's going to get evidence from these candidates that we can then score. Where on earth do we start, Efe? Where do we start with that huge dilemma?
Absolutely. Well, I think with this one, it's good to go back to basics. I think the person who is looking for some potential employees should be able to write on a piece of paper what they are looking for, what type of profile this person is, what skills, what behavioral traits they should have, what sort of profile they should be. So I think they should put together some sort of a description of that person. I think that's really critical, because if you cannot explain it to yourself, you cannot explain it to others, let alone select the others. So I think
you would be surprised how many people, even with traditional interviews, can't explain what they're looking for.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think once you start with that, then you need to select what are the logistics criteria, what are the sort of the pre-interview decision points, and what are the actual interview questions and the criteria for them. Both of them are important, because the first group can help you focus on the viable candidates. For example, if you're looking for someone with the right work permit or right shift preference, location preference, department preference, all those things matter, because they might be a deal breaker for the applicants and for you. So I think it's important to use these.
And so automating those yes/no answers in the remote interview is going to save time and save time wasted on candidates that don't have a work permit. Yeah.
Depending on the platform used, they can be in the form of very binary yes/no responses, or multiple choice, or free text. But there must be, the platform must facilitate this kind of targeting. After that happens, of course, the candidates should move to the actual interview questions. This is really critical because this is where the real magic should happen. This is where you're actually identifying the right people for the job. The questions are really important here. So first of all, these questions must be customized around the needs of your company, around the requirements of this position. So just because a question is popular somewhere doesn't mean that it will work in your reality. So you need to make sure you're choosing the right questions, customizing them to your needs. So they can be behavioral questions to understand how people act in certain circumstances, or they can be specific technical experience questions. The platform you choose for this kind of interview must facilitate all of these. So they shouldn't be too much focused on one area, unless you're looking for someone with really, really specific niche skills. So what will make a huge difference in those interview questions is that ability to take into account past performance of the candidate, because past performance is usually a good indicator of the future performance. So you need to choose your questions around what they did in the past that may be relevant to your role. What makes those questions even more powerful is ask them to provide some sort of an example structure. So they need to describe a context in what setting that happened, what the problem, what the challenge was in that context, what they did specifically, and what was the outcome. An outcome should be a positive outcome, not just any outcome shouldn't cut it. And you need to make sure that not just the people who are talking a lot are rewarded by your system, but the content is actually captured accurately, and you're focusing on the right stuff there. The behaviors should be the behaviors you're looking for.
And so one thing, Efe, because obviously as a recruiter, I've done millions of interviews over the last 30 years. And sometimes people ask a question and then expect the candidate to answer it, and they might not have got the question. So what should remote interviewing, because you haven't got someone going, no, give me an actual example. What should remote interviewing platforms do there to help the candidate give the sort of evidence that we're looking for?
Yeah, I think the candidate should feel very comfortable in the platform. So they shouldn't be sort of in difficulty to use the platform. So I think some practice, some sort of rehearsal before the interview helps them a lot to get accustomed to the interface, so they don't at least waste time with that kind of challenge. Once they're comfortable, once they're in their element, the way the platform asks the questions must be very clear. There must be a specific question. It shouldn't be too long because the candidate may lose track of things. And there must be some explanations. There must be some specific prompts, especially the good old STAR method, situation, task, action, result. It works. So just the fact that we are using technology doesn't mean we just ignore some best practices. There's good reason for those. So the questions must be very targeted, very clear, and should prompt the candidates in a very clear fashion.
And so, with the best platforms, and I've seen this myself when I've been looking around, there's usually practice questions before you start the actual interview.
Yes.
And then there's normally some time between the question being asked and them starting to answer it.
Absolutely.
So obviously we're moving on now to the fourth part of the agenda, which is about the candidate experience and how the candidate gets invited. Most candidates, to be honest, are going to be used to some form of video interview or being sent a link as part of a recruitment process. But what are the things that companies or clients and indeed candidates should expect or look out for in terms of their experience?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lucy. So depending on the profile demographics of the candidates, I think the solution must be customized. So if you're really going to hire a brain surgeon, and only 5 people on the East Coast of US can do that operation, probably you wouldn't go with an automated remote interview setting. You would reach out to them directly in different channels. Usually for early talent programs, entry-level programs, etc., the candidates are also willing to attend to those conversations, and they are exactly as you said, they are used to being interviewed in this fashion. So they will be expecting this, and they will not be surprised. But still, it is going to be very helpful to give them clear instructions, and it's good to share some best practices in advance of the actual interview. Share as much information as possible, and do not bombard them with hundreds of emails or text messages. 1 or 2 emails should be more than enough to give them necessary steer. As long as the content of the mails are carefully constructed and up to date, they will be very helpful. By up to date, what I mean is the easiest mistake that any of us can make. If you put some sort of guideline in the email, it should be an updated link. It shouldn't be a broken link or an old one at least. And the number of questions that you prepare prepping the candidate for should be accurate, the language that they will be. And also you need to make sure from a GDPR point of view, from data and privacy point of view, you inform the candidates that there will be some level of automation, maybe in the decision process, but what they should be expecting, what their rights are, where to look if they want to find out more about it. So you need to be very well covered on those. Yeah, I think when you combine these with the practice questions that you mentioned a minute ago, I think the candidates should be more than able to attend and take the interview. And of course, you need to be prepared for various technical challenges the candidates might have. Your platform should accommodate various technical settings. Some people might be using PCs. Some people may be using mobile devices, varying degrees of connectivity on their signal strength. So you need to be well prepared for those.
And yeah, so I think that anyone that's looking at any type of remote interview solution, it's really important to get some kind of candidate feedback or candidate scoring, because different platforms vary wildly in terms of the candidate experience. And obviously, you don't want your candidates to be demotivated by your interview process.
Absolutely.
So moving on, because we're running out of time really quickly, we've got all these results, all these interviews that have been done by, let's say, 1,000 candidates. And there's all this data. And how can these automatic solutions sort of take the data and enable clients, hiring managers to make a decision on who to proceed with?
Yes, thank you. So actually, collecting the data is relatively easy, and it is so easy for many technology service providers to dump lots of Excel files, thousands of lines, hours and hours of video recordings, and that's so easy to collect. The real trick, what the user should be looking for, is how much workload is taken from their plate. So what the platform does with that information is going to be really critical. Whether the data is standardized, whether it is transparent, whether it is presented in a useful way, I think these are going to make all the difference, because sometimes there are some environments where thousands of people apply, multiples of that, videos are collected, and voila, the recruiter must watch all of those videos or pretend to watch those videos. So something must happen with that data. There must be some sort of global view, some further analysis with that.
And so I know with VireUp, the data gets presented. Sorry, it's not a sales pitch for VireUp, but it's the one that I know best. Gets presented in like a dashboard and heat map. But the critical thing, and this is about meeting or AI legislative requirements in recruitment, is that any use of AI needs to be auditable. It needs to be transparent. Can you talk us through that? Because that's critical.
Yes, of course. I think in different geographies in the world, these policy changes are coming. Usually policy is seen as something that hinders innovation, but I think in this case, this might be the necessary regulation, because it also needs to balance the benefit of the technology, should also take into account the privacy of the individuals, their rights. So I think there is some there's some important points we need to listen to about the upcoming regulation. I think there will be several requirements which may or may not be satisfied by some service providers in this space. Explainability is going to be a huge deal. Explainability is when some automated solution comes up with a conclusion or with some output, there must be a way to audit that and see why the system came up with that. This is really important to measure the health of the system and make sure there is no unwanted systematic bias that puts certain people into certain disadvantages because of the wrong reasons. So I think that's going to be really important, explainability. And I think already there is some regulation around data privacy. So for example, with GDPR, it's pretty much standard in most parts of the world. There might be some differences from country to country, but the essence of that regulation is very similar. I think some core aspects are informing the owner of the data, the actual individuals, about their rights, where their data will be stored, where it will be transferred, where it will be processed, what sort of process it will be, if they want to make changes, what they should do. I think these are really important. The service providers should be very mindful of that. I mean, you should pick your service provider according to this skills, this competence in
meeting the legislation, because it's already in law in the US, isn't it? Yes. And I think it's practically in law in yes. the EU.
Yes.
And the way that I like how you and Arda explain it is like a glass box. Yes. So with so much AI technology, you've got this black box where there's this hugely complicated algorithm doing all sorts of complicated stuff, and it spits out an answer and you don't know why it's yes, giving you exactly. That answer. But with this AI and recruitment technology, you've got to totally, even yes. your basic interviewer like me needs to be able to understand why that candidate scored as well or as mm-hmm. poorly as they did.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Total transparency. Excellent. So, I mean, the use of technology, you know, the primary use of technology in remote interviews is, as I said right at the outset, to be able to take a large applicant pool and manage it in the most efficient, fair, standardized, and transparent way, so that you can reduce the admin that your teams are doing, and also improve the output and the data on which you make a decision on who to bring in for the good old-fashioned face-to-face interview. Some of the things that I've thought about, because we've got another couple of minutes before we are due to wrap up, some of the things that I've thought about with remote interviewing and that other people have raised to me is, what about cheating? I mean, surely you could just get your brother to sit and do the video interview for you, your brother who's a rocket scientist, or your aunt who's a genius. Mm-hmm. What about cheating? How do these solutions get over cheating? Or you could Google the answer.
Yes, so that's a tricky point, no pun intended. So the appetite to identify and prevent cheating is very different from recruiter to recruiter. It's a matter of preference. There are various measures to deal with those. Some of them are process design related. Some of them are technology related. For example, in terms of process design, when you give a candidate some limited time before they answer their questions, for example, if you give the thinking time 10 minutes per question, you might be opening the door for some people to cheat. But if you cut it less, I think there might be a sweet spot where people have enough time to reflect and plan, but also not too much time to search the whole literature about such situations or make up scenarios. Another aspect would be randomizing some questions, randomizing their wordings, by not going too much away from the essence of the actual question. And also some smart question design, maybe about identifying the right experience. This goes to the content and analysis aspect of this. Maybe Arda, would you like to add some comments on that? How the right questions, etc., might be helpful in this context, avoiding cheating point of view?
Yes, thank you. Actually, if you ask the questions from more personalized way, for example, tell me about your experience, this can be helpful because candidate cannot find something on the internet because he has to tell about from his experience or her experience, and that should help, I believe.
Absolutely, with the proper competency-based questions looking at past performance.
Yeah.
What about, are there, sorry.
A couple of points to reflect on this point, Lucy, if you don't mind. So there is this, of course, content and process-related things, but there are also some technologies, up-and-coming technologies that might be helpful. Some of them might have some potential, some of them might be not really fit for purpose. I think it might be helpful to carefully test them before deploying at scale on the field. For example, some companies monitor eye movements, which may or may not mean anything because the person might be really thinking that way, or they might be looking at their own notes, not necessarily they are trying to read from a web page. So I think we need to be careful how to use that kind of additional technologies.
Yeah. So the other thing is that there must be a way, or potentially coming up a way, that if you transcribe the answer to an interview question, it can go through some sort of plagiarism check to make sure that it isn't already out there.
Yes.
But actually, to be honest, people bring up this cheating a lot, but in real interviews, in old-fashioned interviews, people don't tend to lie. People don't tend to exaggerate. If anything, they under-exaggerate. And it's like, you know, you always hear about different people, different famous people lying on their CVs, but the majority of people do not lie on their CVs. We're nicer than people think we are. So we've only got 2 more minutes. Perhaps we should just, the last thing that I wanted to think about is reasonable adjustments. So if people have got a disability, that might mean that they can't access an interview, you know, how do you make reasonable adjustments?
I think that must be built into the tool itself, or the way it is used, or the way it is activated or deactivated should enable that. I mean, the least a tool must be achieving should be enabling written answers when it is required, when there's someone or some people with those needs. So and of course there are many other criteria when it comes to enabling these all reasonable adjustments. So I think that's,
and also I suppose it brings into question things like the use of facial recognition. Sorry, I keep coming back to facial recognition, but people that are neurodiverse, quite a lot of them don't like to have themselves videoed or see themselves videoed. And if you're using facial recognition technology, it's going to disadvantage neurodiverse people.
Yes.
So again, people need to think about the tool and whether you're capturing the video as in the face, or whether you're capturing the content of what they say. So can candidates switch off the video?
Yes.
And just record their answers? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Brilliant. So we need to call it a day. Let's just recap on what we've talked about. Obviously, a very quick summary of what different types of remote interviews are out there, and going into some detail around the different types of automation that's used in video interviews, and then talking around the different types of questions and how to set them up, the candidate experience, and then really touching on how you manage the data and the output. So if because we're really getting out of time, if there's any questions, do put something into chat, or feel free to contact any of us afterwards with follow-up questions or observations. I know it's not a sales thing, a sales pitch for VireUp, but obviously the VireUp tool does automatic interviews, remote interviews in a very, very impressive way. So feel free to reach out to us if you want to find out anything more about that. But it's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Efe.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Arda. Thank you.
Thank
all
you.
Arda. And have a great rest of day, evening.
Thank you very
Goodbye.
much. You too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.